Hello, MEM Adult Literacy Project. We're in August, so we are moving right along. Uh, this training is two, I think that's how you say it, or the Fox. And this month we are going to be talking about cyclical learning. All right. Uh, time as determined by seasons. So it's interesting, a lot of the curriculum that will be created in northern latitudes or high latitudes is going to focus on a very linear process of spring, summer, autumn, or fall, and winter. And that linear cycle um, of planting, tending, harvesting, resting um, is built into many of the ways that not only our culture at higher latitudes functions, but also the languages that arise at those higher latitudes um, tend to move towards that very predictable uh, beginning, middle, and end, uh, as opposed to where you all are at in Gulu, where time in your area of the world is not determined by the same types of seasons. So in equatorial latitudes, depending on where you're at in the world, things can change quite dramatically. Um, for example, one of the things that I understand that I've learned over this last month of researching is that in the southern part of Uganda, you have a wet season, a dry season, a wet season, and a dry season. So two wets and two dry seasons. Whereas in northern Uganda, in Gulu, there's really a large wet season and then a smaller dry season. So planting, tending, harvesting, and resting, all of those things that are built into a very linear focus in higher latitude languages like English, Northern European languages. Um, all of that in Gulu is happening constantly. It depends. The plant that you're planting depends on what time it is within the season, right? So the wet season being so long, sorghum, for example, you might plant just before the wet season. So you might plant it at the end of the dry season, moving into the wet season. Other crops you may harvest, plant, and tend multiple times through your wet season because the wet season is so long. This influences the way that our two languages um, evolve and the way that they think of narratives, the way that they think of that they consider um, communication, right? Is and so the quality of Luo or of languages that have um, less defined spring, summer, winter, fall, um, then their quality is oscillating because it just depends on what part of the wet season you're in or what part of the dry season that you're in. Um, and so all of you told me, you don't plant, you don't put the seeds out for uh, certain plants at the beginning of the dry season because they may start to come up, but the dry season will kill them before you ever harvest them. And so that's a reality. So these seasonal cycles influence our languages. Part of my research, and we're going to discuss this more intensively in our live session. Um, but the grammatical structure of Luo is characterized by a complex system of noun classes, extensive verb morphology, and tonal distinctions. This is really important because English doesn't necessarily have uh, standardized tonal distinctions. We have some ideas of tonal distinctions, but it doesn't necessarily the meaning or the semantics of a certain sentence does not actually depend always on the tonal inflection. So noun classes are each marked by specific prefixes and suffixes. That's common, which govern concord rules for agreement in the verbs, adjectives, and other modifiers, right? Um, this is interesting because nouns in English are largely independent and of those distinctions. Where you might have like waiter or waitress that have a suffix that's qualifying um, whether we traditionally consider the noun a male or a female. But you don't necessarily have prefixes and suffixes to nouns that change their agreement for the verbs, adjectives, and other modifiers, maybe with the exception of possessives. Um, so, verb morphology is in Luo is highly inflected. That means that you're changing one part of a word um, in very uh, minute, very discrete ways to change the meaning of what you're saying. Maybe you're giving it a future tense, maybe you're getting a fast tense. So an inflection, as described in English, would be I run, or let me think of a regular verb instead of run and ran. Run and ran is an irregular verb, but I walk or I walked. So we add the inflection of ed at the end of the word to change the meaning to past tense, right? So this exists also in Luo, and but again, the complexity of the meaning is further enhanced by the use of tone to distinguish meaning. And that is a very big diversion from what's true in English. One of the things that we'll be talking about is how do you, in the written form of Luo, how do you distinguish the differences of use of tone, or is there a way to do that? I will be interested to find out. The tonal system can affect the meaning of words and is crucial for grammatical function. Again, in English, the tonal effect is not really crucial. You can write something down and have the meaning conveyed without having to specifically describe what any sort of tonal change is. Um, uh, so the tonal system can affect the meaning of words and is crucial for grammatical functions such as indicating verb tenses or grammatical mood. In Luo, this is what I understand, the typical sentence structure is like English, is subject, verb, object. Although it can vary depending on context and emphasis. This is also true in English to some degrees, especially in archaic forms of speech. Um, the languages, and this specifically talking about Nile, Niloic languages, so languages that are associated with or in the same family as Luo. The languages also exhibit a rich system of proverbs and idiomatic expressions reflecting their deep cultural roots, like many other indigenous languages. English, on the other hand, the grammatical structure is primarily governed by this idea of subject, verb, object, or this, then this. And that conforms to a very linear structure of how we create our sentences. The subject is typically a noun, pronoun. It performs the action, while the verb indicates the action or the state of being. And then the object receives the action. This organization helps readers, listeners understand who is performing the action and then what the outcome is. So, again, extremely linear. This, then this. English also has 9 generally accepted word classes: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, determinatives, and exclamations. The grammatical function is indicated through the word order, the prepositions, and the possessive form, right? With the apostrophe S or uh, uh, an irregular possessive. Um, I'm trying to think of, or like when you put the apostrophe, it's not an irregular possessive, but if it's a plural possessive, you'd put the apostrophe at the end of the S. Um, Sentence structure can be categorized into 4 basic types: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex sentences. Now, what I'd like to know from you all is, are the sentences in Luo, do they have the same variance? Can they be um, simple? Are some of them compound sentences? Are some of them complex sentences, and some of them can be classified as complex sentences? So, a simple sentence contains one independent clause. A compound sentence has 2 or more independent clauses, joined by a conjunction. I went to the store, but I didn't buy anything, right? So that's a compound sentence. A complex sentence includes one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. I went to the store with my wife. And a complex sentence combines elements of both compound and complex sentence structures. So I went to the store with my wife, but I didn't buy anything. Okay, so here's the questions that we'll be diving into today are: how do you qualify the differences between Luo and English? We really want to create a concept map, or at least a working um, conversation around the conceptual differences between English and Luo. It will help me understand better how to learn Luo. So again, what are these? What words are non-translatable? What concepts are non-translatable? It's a concept that's unique to Luo that you would say in Luo, but you don't really ever need to say it in English. Or it would take many, many, many words to say the same thing that in Luo takes one or two words, or vice versa. What are concepts in English that you don't that in Luo there aren't really words for? What are the different ways of thinking about time? Um, some scholars have suggested that in um, especially from a Swahili perspective, that the concept of future doesn't really exist. Um, it isn't that you can't perhaps say future concepts, but different cultures have different capacities to and mechanisms for how to talk about the future as opposed to the past, as opposed to the unreal past. So something that could have happened but didn't. Um, and so in English, we have modal verbs, could have, should have, things like that, um, to help us talk about unreal conditionals um, or real conditionals. If uh, if I buy my plane ticket, I will come. That's a conditional. So if then. Um, uh, Pretend that I did not buy my plane ticket. I could say, if I would have bought my plane ticket, I would have come. That's it. It's I did not go because I did not buy my plane ticket. So it's a way to talk about something that is unreal. It's not really what happened. Um, but it's a possibility of what could have happened. Even that's a unreal conditional. Different ways. Third bullet point. Different ways in conceiving of space and the environment. This is a really interesting way. One, because um, English being so uh, uh, stark, very logical, not English is not from an indigenous perspective attached to a philosophy or concepts that are, say, divine or religious in any way. Whereas many other cultures, especially indigenous cultures, their language is infused with the divine. And that can help and change the way that we qualify the space and around us and our environment, the way we move through our environment. Do I um, do I believe that nothing has any value other than what I can make out of it, and so the earth is just an object. The environment is just an object. The animals are just things out there for me to dominate? Or do I have a responsibility to them that's built into my language? Uh, that changes the way that I might move through the world. Lastly, cultural importance driven by linguistic features. This is connected to the last one. So um, the f- the way that English is organized forces say, the poetry and even the art to abide by those different concepts or the different ways of thinking and ways of knowing. Uh, in what ways does Luo um, linguistically drive your culture? Um, one way that I can think of that might be an answer to this is the way that you repeat a word for color, right? Alum, alum for green, or alum for a name. So culturally that may drive certain aspects of life. Okay, when we talk about cyclical learning, in as opposed to linear learning. So cyclical learning, again, we're thinking about the seasons, and the seasons represent a cycle. So we know that when we have a spring, or summer and then fall and then winter, we know that we're going to have another spring again. Just like uh, in Gulu, you have a wet season, and then you know that the dry season is coming, but you know the dry season will end. And it ends when the rains start again and end the dry season. And so it's a predictable pattern, right? And things in our environment grow within those predictable patterns. And we know that that perhaps the crops in one year might be bad. There might be a problem with disease, or might be a problem with a pest like locusts or something like that. But we know that next year it might not be like that. And so we know that we're not finished. It's ever ongoing. As opposed to linear learning, linear is a single pass attempt. So you've got one shot. We have uh, uh, a class, it's biology 101, and you start in uh, September and you end the class in December. And you have those 4 months to learn everything that you can about biology 101, or everything that's presented in the curriculum. And then you take a test. And when the test is over, that's it. That's it. Right? Now, maybe you can pay to go take the class again, but we expect that people only take one class one time in linear learning, right? In cyclical learning, when we consider evaluation, evaluation is based on the improvement of yield. So it's based on us getting better at the thing that we're trying to uh, uh, learn. Maybe that's grammar. Maybe that's spelling. Maybe it is vocabulary. Right? Maybe it's fluency. Maybe it's reading. Who knows? Um, in linear learning, the evaluation is based on a summary examination. You have this amount of time, and at the end of that amount of time, you're going to take a test, and whatever whatever your skill set is when you take the test, that's it. It's over. That's the end of the class, right? In cyclical learning, we always know that there's an end to a time, but we know that that time is going to come again. So if we were thinking about like algebra concepts or something like that, or um, reading fluency, we know that we might focus a lot on reading fluency, but maybe there's a time when we back off from reading fluency and really focus on listening skills. And then we come back to reading fluency, right? As the student improves their ability to hear an internal narrative in their head because they listened more and they have an expectation for what the sound of a word should be, then their reading fluency will improve. Um, that's not true in linear learning. Um, in cyclical learning, the importance is in refining the process. So it's in developing your skill. Not to get to a completion of developing your skill, but to indefinitely refine and develop your skill. Whereas in linear learning, the importance is an end goal. It's you need to learn all of these things by this time. That's it. You do or you do not. In cyclical learning, um, it's very environmentally driven, right? So, um, if the power goes out in Gulu for 5 days, well, that will change the type of learning that's happening. It'll change what students come to class. It will change, or if there's um, heavy rains before the wet season is at its height, maybe that changes what needs to be done in tending to your family and to your plants and your crops. So in cyclical learning, the environment is a part of the conversation. In linear learning, it is only about the product. We do not care um, if there are circumstances out there in the world that are affecting your class, your ability to improve, your um, existence as a student or as a teacher. Uh, you have a job to do, and your job as a student is to learn these things, and your job as a teacher is to dictate what these things are that need to be learned. Lastly, in cyclical learning, learning is demonstrated when the time is right. So we call this kairos. Um, for example, uh, a baby does not start to walk typically uh, when they are 6 months old, right? There's a window of time. That window of time is the kairos of learning to walk. It's typically, you know, 8.5 months to 13, 14 months, right? In the United States, they are changing that because kids don't walk as soon as they used to. Uh, so that window of time we would call is the kairos. So it's the right time for walking. In linear learning, learning is demonstrated based on an arbitrary schedule. So if we say your baby must learn to walk by 11 months. Well, uh, what if they don't? What happens if they don't learn how to walk? What if they walk by 12 months or by 13 months? Um, what does that mean, right? Are they going? And so the idea that there's a schedule that cannot be changed is the idea of chronos or chronology, right? Um, and so our system of time in the West, seconds, hours, days, et cetera, that system of time is chronos. It's something that is never changing. It's always what it is. Kairos is completely different because um, what, you know, why should you eat if you are not hungry, right? Uh, why do things when it's not the right time? And so cyclical learning, the concept is very much about identifying when the right time to do it is. For example, like you said, you don't plant seeds for um, uh, for amaranth or sorghum. You don't plant seeds for sorghum in September because the crop won't live. You plant it probably in what, February, maybe March? I don't know. You don't plant corn seeds or maize, you don't plant maize in December. That's not the right time. In linear learning, none of that it doesn't mean anything. Linear learning says plant the seeds at the beginning of class and the fruit has to be ready to eat by the end of class. It doesn't matter when you do it. There are advantages and disadvantages to both of these models. We're just identifying what the current system, what the conventional system of linear learning looks like, what's important to it, as opposed to cyclical learning. All right, so we in GOOM are developing our own cyclical model, and you all are at the eighth stage of this. So, uh, or most of you, if you have been in every class for the last 8 months, and you were with with us during the session in November of last year, then you all are in the rung of the fox tool, right? So you went through the python and the owl, the Naelo and the Tula, and etc., all the way to Keek, which is the bee, and then to tool. So you all are progressing, and I know that all of you who are in this stage of tool have have the knowledge of having been in all of the classes until now. But if a new person joins GOOM, they can join GOOM, but they are not in tool because they do not have the same experience that all of you have. If that makes sense. The people who started the class but did not maybe they left in Lalur, maybe they left in uh, Tula, right? They are not at the same level that you are. They have not been through all of the experience in the class that you have. And so life is different from you. You've experienced seasons that they have not experienced. And so they remain in the season that they stopped their learning process, right? It doesn't mean that they don't go off into the world and learn other things. And we can talk about that in a different time because people are always learning. Humans are always learning, not just because of a class. So, um, so when we talk about this, a very particular cycle of learning that we are developing organically ourselves, we might use this as an indigenous learning cycle. So we're trying to create an indigenous learning cycle. Um, Indigenous learning cycles are developed in accordance to a local set of customs and environmental conditions. Uh, Indigenous learning cycles are inclusive of the real world changes that affect the local population. The Indigenous learning cycle is also rooted in ancestral wisdom rather than geopolitical markets. It doesn't mean that geopolitics doesn't affect us. It does, but our cycle of and our rhythm of development is based on something more rooted in our environment, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the people that we commune with, right? Last week or last month, I'm sorry, we talked about developing rubrics. And so here is a sample rubric for cyclical learning. Now, this will look very different than the rubrics that were very specifically based on literacy skills. Those are very concrete skills. This, as a sample cyclical learning rubric, is testing for or it's examining different processes and it's trying to account for those. So let's say that this model is going to be, we're going to have four stages, right? And for to make it easy to remember, we're going to say what other sets of four exist in our culture that are very easy to remember. And so we'll say, okay, well, there's the four directions. Everybody knows east, south, west, and north. And so those are our four stages, right? And then each stage has a different focus. East is visioning. The focus is awakening or understanding. The literacy indicators for this are that they listen deeply to stories and voices. Um, that the learner begins to make connections between texts and lived experiences, and that they demonstrate curiosity and respect for diverse knowledge. Right? Our guiding indigenous value here is respect, honoring the voices of others, especially elders and ancestors. You see? South, exploration, growth, growing our voice, putting, filling up our lungs and pressing that out into the world through vibration. Explores ideas through speaking, writing, drawing, or storytelling. A learner in this realm will share personal connections to text. They take risks with language and expression. And the guiding indigenous value here is courage. The willingness to take a chance, the willingness to share one's voice and create meaning. West or reflection. Again, we focused on this last week or last month that reflection is important. It's an incredibly important skill for building community, is understanding what I have done and how I can change what I do in the future in order to help serve the people around me, both community and family members. So the reflection, the focus is a deepening into knowledge. So uh, it's a going deeper rather than an ascent. It's a descent. Reflects a person in this area needs to demonstrate that they reflect critically and holistically on texts. Considers multiple perspectives, including land, ancestors, community. They demonstrate humility in their learning. Um, and that humility is the indigenous value that we're really focusing on in this area. Last one, north, is the integration of these things, the contributing to community. So, in what ways does my literacy development contribute back to the community? How do I apply learning in meaningful ways that affect my own life and my family's life and the community's life? Right? Um, in what ways do I create or share stories that connect myself, others, my land, the environment around me? In what ways do I practice reciprocity through language and storytelling? Again, reciprocity is giving back that knowledge, giving back through knowledge sharing. So it's what I bring back to the community when I have learned something that I then owe the community the resource of that gift. Okay, so your homework for this month. I would like to know again, Narrative structure. Where do you see yourself, or where do you see your students challenging their own preconceived notions about either themselves or the community? So again, we're discussing literacy from a holistic perspective. So the idea is that yes, they are learning to read and write, but the content that you're talking about in your classes is more than just reading and writing. It's everything. It's what they eat. It's how they raise their children. It's how we treat our neighbors, how we express love and grace, right? So, in what ways is that happening? Are you seeing that in your students in the class? Number two, how has your personal ethos, your concept of what's important to you and what philosophically drives you as a teacher, your ethos, how has your personal ethos of teaching been challenged by this course, by the MEM Adult Literacy Project? How are you different today than you were when you before you began? And number three, in what ways do you see the work of the MEM Adult Literacy Project creating and facilitating change in your community? In what tangible ways? Not what do you hope for? What ways do you already see that it's happening? Even if it's very, very, very small. What small, what big, what changes can you identify just because this project exists? Thank you all blessings. I will see you shortly for the live session. Take care.